Stocks close higher on Wall Street as the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq close at record levels. The Dow also closes higher, snapping a 4-day losing streak. Asian markets trade with gains, while the GIFT Nifty is suggesting a strong start for the Indian markets. Crude prices also continued to rebound, with Brent gaining over 2% to trade above $84 a barrel after posting the best week since April. Gold prices, meanwhile, dip on rising bond yields. Hyundai Motor files a DRHP for its IPO, which could potentially be India's largest to date. The automaker will become the first car manufacturer in India to go public in nearly 2 decades. The news also drives Hyundai Motor stock to a record high. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra forays into active politics. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge announces that she will contest the Wayanad Lok Sabha seat by election as Rahul Gandhi picks Rai Bareli to represent in the Lok Sabha. And as many as 15 passengers lose their lives while numerous others are injured after 3 coaches of the Kanchenjunga Express derailed after crashing into a goods train in West Bengal's Darjeeling district yesterday. The railway minister announces an ex gratia of 10 lakh rupees for the deceased. We are back after a long weekend, and it's the truncated week. And to start that off, we are here with Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18 in the Mumbai newsroom. I am Hormus Patakia. Let's first take a look at how the Asian markets are faring this morning. It's a slight rebound across the Asia Pacific after the fall that we witnessed in yesterday's trading session. Remember that the rest of Asia was trading while we were off for a holiday. The Hang Seng is up 0.4%. The Taiwanese index is up almost 1% now. The Japanese indices, the Nikkei was down almost 2% yesterday. That has recovered almost half of those losses. That is up 1%. The Topix in Japan is also trading with gains of around 0.5% there as well. The Korean indices also are staging a bit of a rebound. The Kospi is also trading with gains of close to 0.8% as we speak. So a positive start across the Asia Pacific. Pull up the GIFT Nifty as well. It was a good week for our Indian markets as well yesterday, and they would look to continue with that trend. And there you can see the GIFT Nifty indicating a gap up start for our own markets as well, 124 points on the implied open. But the Asian markets are trading positive, and that is because the US markets ended higher yesterday, with the S&P 500 closing 0.8% higher, while the Nasdaq finished with gains of almost 1%. Both indices reached an all-time high during the session and closed at record levels. The Dow advanced about 0.5% to end 4 days of losses. CNBC Steve Kovac gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
U.S. markets were up across the major indexes Monday, with the S&P and Nasdaq once again hitting all-time highs. The Dow was up 189 points, the S&P 500 higher by 42 points, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq was up 168 points. The IRS and Treasury Department announced a plan today to close what they called a major tax loophole that could generate more than $50 billion in additional tax revenue over the next decade. Essentially, it would stop businesses and wealthy people from manipulating their assets to find ways to lower their taxes. And the U.S. government today sued Adobe, accusing the maker of Photoshop and Acrobat of hurting customers by enrolling them in its most expensive subscription plans without clearly disclosing it. The complaint accuses Adobe of hiding important terms for the plans in fine print and behind text boxes or hyperlinks. The lawsuit is seeking fines, an injunction, and other remedies. Adobe has yet to publicly respond. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you, Mumbai.
And staying with the U.S. market, let's also get in some opinion on the Fed's inflation fight, the state of the economy, their rate path outlook, and more.
The market isn't paying too much attention to the dot plot than the change in the dot plot last week. I mean, I don't know. The markets go up, markets go down. They tend to overreact a bit to the latest string of data. So I'm not reading very much more into today's market reaction than I am to the dot plot last week. Jay Powell went out of his way to present as neutrally as possible. He did a good bit of work trying to get people to de-emphasize the SEP, the dot plot. He emphasized that there had been progress on inflation, but they needed to see more. They needed to be more confident. He talked about the fact that the labor market struck him now as tight but not overheated. So I thought he was doing his best to preserve some optionality for the FOMC.
last week was that inflation data was pretty soft relative to what was anticipated. And we got actually, if you strip out shelter, which the chair talked about in the press conference, core CPI, 3-month moving average is 2.0. That number was over 12. It's down to 2.0. So that was a pretty big deal. PPI followed on it. So listen, we are moving, and it's going to get core PCE, which is the Fed's favorite measure. We're going to get that to, we're going to get probably a 0.1 or so in the next month or so. So pretty good numbers. So, and simultaneously, you're starting to see a little bit of softness in labor. We still had a strong payroll report, but you look at the JOLTS report, you look at claims picking up a bit. So we're definitely closer to where the Fed could move. I think they can move soon, and we're definitely closer.
Well, that's all we have on the global market action, but how will all of these overnight cues impact our Indian markets? We have our research team joining in with how the trade setup looks like at the stocks that are likely to be in the news and some F&O cues as well. First up, we go over to Vamakshi, who is joining in with all the market cues that we need to watch out for today. Vamakshi, good morning. It's a positive handover from Wall Street. What's the setup looking like?
Well, absolutely, Hormaz, a positive handover from Wall Street indeed. But let's also look at what happened in the last week. It was a slow but steady rise for the benchmark index. Nifty was up nearly 0.75%, and in fact, it managed to hit a record high of 23,490 on Friday. More importantly, it has taken out previous highs of the previous two sessions. The trading, however, was range bound. It was limited to 200 points between 23,300 and 23,500. On the other hand, Nifty Bank was up nearly 0.4%. It managed to close above the 50,000 mark on Friday and in fact posted weekly gains for the fifth consecutive week. As far as the VIX was concerned, post-elections, it saw a very sharp cut of almost 24% to 12.82. Broader markets also outperformed. Nifty mid-cap was up nearly 4%, while Nifty small-cap was up nearly 5% last week. As far as sectoral performances are concerned, Realty and Infra Index inched higher last week. They were among the top sectoral gainers, while on the other hand, FMCG and IT were the only sectors that were trading in the red for the entire week last week. FIIs turned net buyers for the week. FII bought almost 2,031 crores worth of shares. And as far as global markets are concerned, last week, Nasdaq, S&P, both of these indices managed to rise in the trading session last week. But on the other hand, Dow Jones saw a dip of almost 0.5%. It is expected to be a truncated week for Indian markets. Positive handover coming in from US indices. The GIFT Nifty also showing a positive start to the day.
Positive start indeed. Vamakshi, thanks a lot for joining in there with the market cues you need to watch out for. Now over to Upasna, who would list out the stocks you need to watch out for in today's trading. Upasna, over to you.
Good morning. First up, let me start with IIFL Finance. The company has reported its Q4 FY24 numbers. The core loan portfolio grew 22% on a YoY basis and GNPA stood at 2.3% versus 1.7% sequentially. Paytm and Zomato will also be in focus as Paytm has issued clarification on the report stating Zomato in talks to acquire Paytm's movie ticketing business. Paytm says that the company explores various strategic opportunities and potential transfer of Paytm's entertainment business is one opportunity under consideration. Next up is Bharti Airtel. The company prepays 7,904 crore debt to DOT to clear deferred liabilities for spectrums acquired in 2012 and 2015. Next up, TCS will also be in focus as US court imposes $194 million penalty for trade secret misappropriation. Next up, RVNL will also be in focus as company emerges as the lowest bidder for a project worth 161 crores of East Coast Railway, and REITs will also be in focus as the company has signed MOU with Damodar Valley Cooperation for Innovation in Rail Infra Works. HAL will also be in focus as Defence Ministry has issued RFP for procurement of 156 light combat helicopter, and All Cargo Terminal has given its May 24 monthly update. CFS volumes up 2% on YoY basis and up 3% on a month-on-month basis. Biocon will also be in focus as US FDA has concluded a GMP inspection of API facility on 14th of June and has issued 3 observations for the same. And lastly, Zydus Life Sciences will also be in focus as the company has received tentative approval from US FDA for Azelsatin Medoxomil tablets, which is mainly for the treatment of high blood pressure patients. And these tablets have an annual sales of $78 million in US is what the company has highlighted. So all in all, these stocks will remain in focus today.
You come on the back of a long weekend, so there are plenty of stocks to watch. Upasna, thanks for that. And finally, Nigel joins in with cues from the FNO space. Nigel, good morning. On the cusp of 23,500 is the Nifty. What's the setup looking like?
Well, that's right. Hormuz, last week, almost the entire week, we went to around 23,500, but we couldn't close above those levels. And the chart comes up for you on the screen. The good news is that on Friday, we came off the high point of the day, but just around 25 points by the time we wound up. So that's good news because we ended closer to around the 23,500 mark. What did the FIs do? Well, they added long positions close to 11,000 contracts. And in terms of the short positioning, well, it's come down from around 87% just 2 weeks or so ago. It's come down to around 53% post this long addition, and we've seen a fair bit of short covering from the FIs. So yes, they continue to remain net short with 25,000 contracts on the short side, while clients remain net long with close to around, roughly around 25,000 contracts on the long side. But both those two, have come off drastically from the recent peak. The FIs were net short by more than 3 lakh contracts. The clients were net long with more than 3 lakh contracts. So both of them, they're maintaining their stance, but it's come off considerably from the top. The India VIX, well, it's halved in the last 2 weeks or so. It had gone to around 25 odd, and now, in fact, it's come back down to around the 12.5 odd levels. The PC has perked up to around 1.3 because put writing has been more aggressive. So you have seen that the 23,500 call that added 10 lakh shares, but the 23,300 put added more than 20 lakh shares. And that explains why the PCR is moving towards the upper end of the range, which brings us to the levels. Resistance comes in at around 23,600. While we have the 23,200, which is important on the downside. The Nifty Financial Services Index, well, that plays out the weekly expiry, so that could be another mover you'll watch for the final hour of trade. Back to you.
Nigel, thanks a lot for that update, and time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra is all set to make her electoral debut. We get you more details on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Back with us here on Power Breakfast, and the countdown to the union budget next month has begun. CII President Sanjeev Puri says that India Inc. is expecting the budget to be an inclusive one and sees investment into capex. He also suggested that the government should bring in GST under a 3-rate structure. Speaking to CNBC TV 18, Shireen Bhan, he added that there are green shoots visible in the rural economy.
There are really two main suggestions that CII has as far as GST is concerned. And I think given that GST is now matured, it's time to look at that. One is to get into a three-rate structure. And the second is, there are some areas like petroleum, real estate, etc., which are outside the realm of GST. So we're suggesting that everything now should fall within the realm of GST. So two major suggestions is what we are advocating here. Certainly, green shoots are there in the rural economy, and this has been articulated by many CII members as well. And we also find that the expectation of the crop this time, because of the rainfall, is also expected to be a good crop. So all this should be a sentiment positive. It should bring more income into the hands of the farmers. And based on that, we've seen, as in the past, that the inflation tends to moderate. So that's why we are expecting, CII's estimate is that we're looking at something like a 4.5%. Yesterday's figure also shows the core was at 3%. It's really the food that has been on the higher side, but we believe it will get better given that the rainfalls, etc. forecast are going to be better. So that is going to be a positive going forward.
Moving on then, the food safety regulator has ordered a further probe into spices made by MDH and Everest. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that a recall of several spice varieties has also been ordered after adverse reports from 5 states. Process of levying penalties will begin soon as well. Timsi Jaipuria joins in now with the details. Timsi, what does this mean for both these companies?
Well, that's right. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that food safety regulator FSSAI has begun a fresh detailed probe into spices made by MDH and Everest. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that FSSAI has also ordered a recall of batches of several spices made by MDH and Everest, a process which will soon begin on ground. Not just this, currently the regulator is assessing the penal action and the quantum of penalty that will be levied on MDH and Everest, as they have been found unsafe for human consumption. Sources add the move comes on the back of the fact that the regulator has received adverse reports by 5 states, which include Punjab, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Telangana and Goa. Remember, these states, along with other states, had actually undertaken a drive based on FSSAI's order that a pan-India action for random testing and sampling of spices is required, and the action was conducted throughout the month of May. Under this action, adverse reports of contamination with high levels of pesticide, insecticides have been found in several spices varieties sold by MDH and Everest, and thus these reports have now been received by the food regulator at center. Along with Everest and MDH, many local brands are also part of this recall and penalty. For instance, in case of Rajasthan state authorities seized about 12,000 kgs of various spices over alleged contamination. Earlier, on the alleged presence of ethylene oxide, FSSAI had indicated that 28 reports with no contamination in spice samples were reported, but the regulator was awaiting reports from 6 more labs. As we speak, many other reports are still under examination, so let's see what happens finally. Back to you.
Timsy, thanks a lot for that update. Now, Congress National Secretary Priyanka Gandhi Vadra is all set to make her electoral debut from Kerala's Wayanad constituency. This comes after elected MP Rahul Gandhi has decided to relinquish the seat and retain the Rai Bareli seat instead. Party President Mallikarjun Kharge made the announcement following discussions on Monday evening. Rahul Gandhi called it a tough decision to leave the Wayanad seat, while Priyanka Gandhi sounded confident of winning from the constituency again. Now, a by-poll typically will be held 6 months after a notification of a vacancy. And moving on to some somber news now, at least 15 people were killed and over 50 were injured after an express train collided with a goods train in Darjeeling yesterday. 3 coaches of the Kanchenjunga Express were derailed in the crash. Investigation is currently underway, and the initial reports say that the goods train did not follow the stop signal and collided with the passenger train. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee expressed their condolences to the families of the deceased. Union Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav visited the crash site and also announced an ex gratia of 10 lakh rupees to the families of the deceased and 2.5 lakh rupees to those with severe injuries and 50,000 rupees to those who sustained minor injuries. Time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we get you cues from the commodity space. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Back with us here on Power Breakfast, and as promised, Manisha Gupta is now joining in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning. What are you picking up today?
Well, I'm looking at the crude oil price almost where we are trading at the 6-week highs right now. Overnight, even as it was a truncated week for India, we saw 2% of gains in the crude oil prices on Monday. The prices are back above $80 for WTI and 84 is holding for the Brent prices. Well, the U.S. summer driving season demand is expected to be picking up. The U.S. hurricane season also now starts. The OPEC and allies have reiterated staying with output quota cuts. And then there also is decline in inventories in the second half anticipated from OPEC and IEA reports there. And the oil rigs have seen a decline for a third straight week. The U.S. oil rigs are now at the lowest since 2022, and 64 oil rigs fewer than where we were last year, and that has been supportive for the crude oil prices. But can't say the same about metals, because many of these metals are trading in slightly negative. Aluminum prices near 2-month lows. So is the case with copper, where the prices have declined to near 2-month lows. The industrial output in China has slowed down in the month of May, and that really seems to be bothering metals across.
Manisha, thanks a lot for that update from the commodity space. And let's now get to the latest update on the West Asia conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved his 6-member war cabinet that was created on the 11th of October to manage the military campaigns against Hamas and Hezbollah. The move comes days after centrist former General Benny Gantz quit the emergency cabinet. Prime Minister Netanyahu is now expected to hold consultations on the war with a small group of ministers, including Defense Minister and Strategic Affairs Minister, who had been in the war cabinet previously. Now, the three-day G7 summit that was underway in Italy came to an end over the weekend. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also in attendance and held bilateral talks with several world leaders. Our colleague Sanjay Suri gets you the highlights from the summit from Apulia in Italy.
India made a number of bilateral advances at the G7 just concluded here in Puglia in the south of Italy, principally with host Italy. But on the other hand, managed to open its doors wider to a transatlantic dip in relations that could more than undo some of those gains. Prime Ministers Modi and Meloni clearly hit it off, and they had the most productive meeting of all the bilaterals that the Indian PM had. On the other end from Meloni, on the down end of the India spectrum at the G7 was none other than the US. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made it clear that the Pannu case would be raised. He said this is a matter of continuing dialogue at very senior levels and that the US has made its views on this known. And in the end, after all the bilateral meetings that happened with Meloni, with Macron, Olaf Scholz, Rishi Sunak, Zelensky, Ishida, the enduring fallout could arise from the one that did not happen with the US. India had announced an inquiry into the Pannu indictment, and that was indictment by a grand jury in the US in which an Indian official is accused of leading a criminal plot to assassinate Pannu. Little has emerged as the outcome of any such inquiry. At least 4 pitfalls lie along that path of continuing delay. One, that the Biden administration will just live with such a delay through its present term. All the indications are that it will not. Second, it is not certain that Trump will replace Biden come November. A felony conviction now hangs above Trump. Third, it is not certain either that if Trump is at all elected, his administration would necessarily do more for India as India wants than a Biden administration currently is prepared to do. Finally, and not least, the matter could be out of the hands of any US government. It would become a matter for the courts. They don't spare their own president. We should know soon enough whether the Indian government's current tactics have managed to get it smartly past a mess, or whether India has taken some missteps along a path that could prove very damaging to relations with the US.
Sanjay Suri, thanks a lot for that update. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Power Breakfast from me and the team that put this show together. Thank you so much for watching. The GIFT Nifty indicating a gap up start for our own markets, and that will be taken forward by Bazaar Morning Call on the other side.